Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is episode number 27 of Pop Culturally Deprived, and today we're going to be talking about When Harry Met Sally on your, right, I said that, podcast. I'm Mandi Kay.
And I'm Matthew Vose.
Today we are joined by special guest Lani Diane Rich. Lani is a story expert, the owner of Chipperish Media, and podcaster extraordinaire behind the podcast Jed Bartlett is My President, How Story Works, and Big Strong Yes. Welcome, Lani, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh my God, thank you so much for asking me. I have this thing about romantic comedies. I love romantic comedies. And when we talked about me doing an episode with you guys, I was like, When Harry Met Sally, it's got to be it. And that you hadn't seen it warms my little heart. I love that there's all this stuff. And I have the same reaction every single time, even though I've known you for a long time and I know your history and I know you haven't engaged with a lot of stuff. But every time you guys have a new episode of Pop Culturally Deprived, I'm like, you haven't seen that? That's always my response. So I love that I get to be here. I'm so honored that I get to be here when you first experience When Harry Met Sally.
I am really glad you wanted to do this episode because it gave me a reason to watch When Harry Met Sally, so thank you.
Oh, good.
Before we get into talking about the film, we wanted to say thank you to everyone who's supported us in the first 2 weeks of our Patreon. We've just been thrilled by the support and we've had some wonderful feedback from everyone. If you've not had a chance to look, please head on over to patreon.com/eloquentgushing and you can become a patron of our shows and help support the network. Lani, you've had a lot of success with Patreon. It's helped you develop and do some really interesting things with your podcasting.
Oh, yeah. Patreon has been everything because I've never been a big fan of advertising, because you have to, podcasting is expensive and, you want to do it because you love the work and because you love what you do. But advertising to me always feels, a little disingenuous because if somebody pays me to advertise, then I'm sort of, supporting that product. And what if I don't like that product? What if I don't like that company? It's a complicated kind of thing. But if you want to do this work, it's very, very difficult to fund it all yourself. And when you have the people that you are beholden to, are not advertisers, but rather the people who love what you do and who feel strongly enough about what you do to kick you $1 or $10 or $20 a month, whatever it is that they want to give you. It's wonderful because the people that you are doing it for are the same people that you owe everything to. And it's nice to have that be, the same group of people. So like you're serving one master, the people who love what you do and who care enough about it to kick you a little money every month and make it possible for you to do the things you do and also possible to do more things. It makes all of that possible. So Patreon supporters, as far as I'm concerned, are the best human beings in the world. And they also make the work available to the people who don't have that. There are a lot of people who love what you do, who would love to give you money, but they can't because, times are tough and things are difficult and people work really hard. And sometimes they don't have extra money at the end of the month to throw into something like that. So the Patreon supporters not only support you because they love what you do, but they have this incredible generosity of spirit that makes them able to give you money that other people can't give you, to make it possible for you to do this so that the people who get it for free can get it for free because of the generosity of the Patreon supporters. So I am a huge, huge lover of that whole system. I love Patreon. I love the people at Patreon. And I so appreciate the supporters. And I'm so excited that you guys are getting support. I'm a supporter of Eloquent Gushing. I love what you do. And I'm very excited to see how you move forward.
Yeah, we've got some great plans, so we're looking forward to it too. Terrific. So, When Harry Met Sally, Mandi, why have you never watched this film before?
Oh, you guys, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. This movie is made specifically to delight me. Lani, I'm right there with you with romantic comedies. And so all I can do is like chalk this up to my misguided youth when I thought old movies were awful. I mean, I don't know because I should have watched this movie years ago.
Well, better late than never, right?
Yeah.
And you had this wonderful experience of seeing it for the first time that you can share with everybody. I mean, that's what makes this show, Pop Culturally Deprived, so fantastic, is that we all get to like kind of vicariously through you go back and experience these things we love again for the first time. I think it's brilliant.
And hopefully I end up loving these things that everybody else loves too. I always feel really bad when I don't. So I'm really excited that I loved this one.
Yay.
So I was putting together the history and production information for this movie, and oh my gosh, you guys, there's so much out there. Trying to narrow it down was hard. So I am just pulling together kind of just the bare bones information about this movie, and most people probably already know the rest anyway. When Harry Met Sally was released on July 29th, 1989, and is a romantic comedy written by Nora Ephron and directed by Rob Reiner. The two had wanted to do a project together, but they didn't yet have anything to work with. So they met for lunch one day, and the seeds were planted that eventually grew into this hit film. Rob told Nora stories of his life as a single man after divorce, and the character of Harry, played by Billy Crystal, was based on these stories. Sally, played by Meg Ryan, was based on Ephron and some of her friends. When Ephron was writing the screenplay, she would often interview people who worked for the production company to give her more source material to work with. Those interviews were rewritten and shot with actors and appeared throughout the film. The movie had a budget of $18 million and grossed $92.8 million at the box office in North America. Nora Ephron was nominated for an Oscar for the screenplay, but she lost to Tom Schulman for Dead Poets Society. And in 2004, it was adapted for the stage in a play that starred Luke Perry and Allison Hannigan. I don't even have to try with the Buffy reference here, it just dropped into my lap.
There it is, right there. I had no idea. I don't know how somehow I missed that Allison Hannigan played Sally in a stage version of When Harry Met Sally, but if that's on YouTube, I got to go find that.
I didn't have time to look, but I'm really hoping there are at least photos or clips or something because I kind of really need to see that.
Oh yeah, and you got a dual Buffy reference because Luke Perry, of course, was in the original Buffy the
Yes.
Vampire Slayer movie, which was terrible, but it doesn't matter because it's Buffy.
Exactly. Yes. Buffy is one of those movies that I don't care how bad it is, I will watch it every time I see it on television.
Just because it started the whole thing, it started the thing that changed television, but that's a different discussion. I'm not going to go into that.
If you'd like more of Lonnie's thoughts on Buffy, go to her YouTube channel and watch her vlog, Still Pretty.
Yes, I get tons of thoughts about Buffy in there. So
I can completely see Alison Hannigan doing it when you think of her role in How I Met Your Mother. It's
Oh,
a
yeah.
really similar character, so I can definitely see that coming through.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Well, if you, like me, have not seen When Harry Met Sally, it is a rom-com about two mismatched people who keep running into one another over the years. Eventually, well, it's a rom-com. You know what happens. So, how did everybody watch the film? Matthew, how did you watch this one?
This one was on Sky Cinema, so I watched it when I came home from holiday.
Lonnie, how'd you watch it?
well, I got to tell you, old school DVD, y'all. I mean, I had the DVD of this. I've had it forever. I take it out, every couple of years and watch it again. And so I was real super old school with this.
I was really disappointed to find that this was not available streaming anywhere, or at least on the streaming subscription services. I had seen a couple of screenshots that were branded by Hulu, and so I thought for sure Hulu had it, but apparently they don't anymore.
Oh,
So I ended up having to rent it from Amazon.
oh well, it's worth every penny.
It was good. It was good.
Mandy, you've said that you love rom-coms. What was your expectation for this one when you went into it?
At this point in my life, I expected to enjoy it because I honestly haven't seen a romantic comedy that I've hated. I mean, I've seen bad romantic comedies, but even the worst romantic comedy is still going to be something I like.
You're just like me.
So that's where I am with this movie is I just, it's a romantic comedy, Meg Ryan. There was no way I wasn't not going to like it.
Right. I'm feeling a little odd man out here. I'm not the biggest fan of romantic comedy. But I think it's my thing of I like to watch something that kind of challenges, does something a bit different. And it's not a genre that ever... Oh, there's not many films that really go, oh, yeah, that was a different sort of romantic comedy about two people getting together.
Oh, well, okay, now I have to make an argument about this, all right? This is one of the things that always drives me crazy, is that people tend to think that if you know how the story is going to go, that if you know that these two people are going to fall in love, that suddenly the story has no value. If you know what's going to happen, if Bruce Willis is in an action movie, you know he's not going to die, he's going to be fine, right? Unless it's Armageddon. Spoilers. Anyway, The whole point is that the predictability of a story is not its main value. The surprise and the twist is something that we fetishize in our culture, but it's not the value of the story. You can tell the same story over and over and over again. Look at fairy tales. We've been telling Cinderella, we've been telling Sleeping Beauty for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. We've been telling Hamlet for hundreds of years. It's not about knowing what's going to happen or how it's going to end or any of that stuff. It's about the journey. It's about the experience. It's about how all of those things happen. So my argument is that just because we know they're going to fall in love and get together does not in any way detract from the value of a romantic comedy. I'm stepping off my soapbox. You guys continue your show.
And we've discussed spoilers before, and we
Yeah.
have slightly different viewpoints on it. But it's not even the spoiler. It's the when someone tells me the premise of 2 weeks' notice. I'm
Hmm.
not sure I needed to go and see that film to know what I was going to be taking out of it, and it's
Well,
not so
no,
much the
that's
surprise.
fair.
It's just and there are, as we will find as we talk, there are rom-coms that I adore that do some really good stuff that is worth watching.
Yes, no, absolutely. There's a lot of good ones. And I'm not going to say that there aren't bad rom-coms out there, but their badness is not because of the predictability of the people getting together. The badness
Yeah,
lies in other things.
yeah, and to say the same thing about the genres I go to, there are bad sci-fi space movies. Serenity, for instance,
Hmm.
Oh,
did not push the genre anywhere.
yep.
So Mandy, there's lots of big stars, big names, people who've done significant works. What is your experience of Rob Reiner, Meg Ryan, Billy Crystal, Nora Ephron?
Less than people would okay, probably not less than people would expect for me, but considering how famous all of these people are, less than I expected, honestly, just because I'm so familiar with all of these names that I expected to be much more familiar with their work. Rob Reiner, The Princess Bride, Misery, A Few Good Men. That's it. And
Okay,
now, of
that's
course,
the
When
big
Harry
stuff,
Met
though. Yeah.
Sally. It is the big stuff at
Yeah.
least, but I mean his list is like three times as long as that, and
And
that's all
those are
that's
the
on
only
there.
ones you know?
Yeah,
Wow.
Stand By Me. I really want to watch Stand By Me, but I haven't yet.
I
It's
haven't
actually on
seen
the list, I
Stand By
think.
Me. Why am I always surprised when you say you haven't seen something? I know you, Mandy. I don't know why it shocks me every time. You haven't seen that? Okay. I don't know. I gotta have you over for a weekend, and I'm just gonna like go through all the movies.
Okay. Well, let me just say when we move to the Meg Ryan, it's gonna shock you even more.
Oh my god.
I mean, because I've seen Sleepless in Seattle and City of Angels. You've Got Mail, Kate and Leopold.
Oh,
That's
okay.
it. That's it. I haven't seen French Kiss. I haven't seen. Oh, I'm sure there are other big ones.
Well, French Kiss is the
Joe
best
versus the
rom-com you
volcano. Yeah.
Joe versus the Volcano, don't watch that. That's not good. But French Kiss you have to see.
Okay. Um, let's see. Billy Crystal, obviously Princess Bride. I mean, because that's my favorite thing that he's ever done.
Mhm.
I have actually seen City Slickers, you guys.
You
I don't know
have.
how. I have. I have seen
Good.
City Slickers,
Hmm.
Hamlet, and Monsters Inc. You know, haven't really, he's another one of those, you just kind of learn about him through osmosis.
Mm.
Hmm.
He's so prolific in entertainment that you can't not know who he is, even if you don't watch his stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, hasn't he hosted like every Oscar ceremony ever?
He's hosted one of everything. He's
Yeah.
he's done everything at least once.
Yeah. And then Nora Ephron, I was actually surprised at how short her filmography was
Mhm.
because I've heard her name so much. But really, I've only seen the Meg Ryan movies, the Sleepless in Seattle, You've Got
Ah.
Mail. And of course, I mean, I have seen Julie and Julia because that book is one of my all-time favorite books, so I had to see the movie. Don't see that movie, you guys.
No, half of that movie is great though. The
The
Meryl
Meryl Streep
Streep,
half.
Stanley Tucci stuff is fantastic.
Yes, it is. And I'm so
Yeah.
sad that the Amy Adams part is not, because I love Amy Adams, but it wasn't
Yeah.
good, you guys.
She wrote a film called My Blue Heaven, which is a Steve Martin and Rick Moranis vehicle, and
Mhm.
it's so little known, but it's just delightful. It's Steve Martin doing something a little different than he normally does as a mafia informant who's put into witness protection, and it's just lovely, the whole thing. Oh, and it's Joan Cusack as well, who we now like.
Oh, Joan Cusack is fantastic.
It sounds like we should put that on the list.
Yeah, again, I find it really hard sometimes because it's not a pop culture film. Because most people have never heard of this thing.
My Blue Heaven, no, absolutely, that's pop culture. I think you could say that's pop culture. I think there's a historical value to My Blue Heaven.
Okay, we will put it on the list.
Lonnie said it's okay, so we're
Sure,
doing it.
If
I'm
I
the
haven't
arbiter
already.
of what's of value. Sure.
I was going to do a whole thing of your experience of other films, but I think as we've just found, you've seen some of the sort of pinnacle of rom-coms in the modern era. But there's a couple of films that are very like, or that When Harry Met Sally is very like, Annie Hall and a film called A Lot Like Love. Have you seen either of them?
I've never even heard of A Lot Like Love,
Okay.
but no, I've seen neither of them.
They both take a very similar approach. Annie Hall is Amanda Peet and Ashton Kutcher.
I mean, Annie Hall is Diane Keaton and
Mm.
Woody Allen.
Yes, yeah, Woody Allen's best film in inverted
Yes.
commas.
No,
Well, I don't think I've ever seen a Woody Allen film, so
Okay.
yeah, you're not missing much. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. I like Annie Hall. I don't really like Woody Allen in general.
okay. I do really, really like Diane Keaton though, so that may be
She's
worth
fantastic.
considering.
Yeah.
He wrote the film for her, so maybe
Okay.
one to consider. Right, When Harry Met Sally. Mandy, did you enjoy this film?
Big surprise, you guys. I really liked it.
Yay!
Yay!
That's all I got to say about that.
Okay.
I really liked it. I mean, we're going to talk about the rest, so.
Okay, what did you take away? What was the most enjoyable? Was it performance, the chemistry, just the story?
I think, honestly, it was the chemistry between Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal. I was surprised by that because when I think of Billy Crystal, I don't think romantic comedy lead, you know? I mean, he's the gravedigger in Hamlet. He's the old man in Princess Bride. He's not the love interest, and so I was really, really surprised by how much I ended up enjoying his character and the chemistry he had with Meg Ryan. I really loved the character arc that Harry had. I mean, I despised him at the beginning, and by the end, I loved him. When a movie can take you from a place of really not liking something and then bringing you to that place where you have emotion and genuine feeling and connection, I think it's doing something really, really well. And When Harry Met Sally did that for me.
Oh yeah.
I love the way for Billy Crystal, they tried to make him look younger in the way they dress him, but there's no way they can make him look younger. He looks 40 in that
Yes.
opening sequence. But you're
He is
absolutely
the
right.
oldest college senior ever.
Yeah. He's just an arse.
I mean, he did get the douchebag floppy hair
Yeah.
that
He
college
did,
seniors get, so
Mhm.
they tried.
He's just got this, oh, I know what the world is like. I'm so clever and so wise and so on. And he's just an arse to her and to everyone around him.
Yeah, and he's still kind of charming though. Like there's something about Billy Crystal, at least for me, that I find him there's something about him that's charming even when he's being a jerk. And in the beginning he absolutely is being a jerk. The way he's spitting the grape seeds on the window, which is one of the things that just made me crazy. And this whole
Yes.
but I like that she calls him on it though. Like he's a jerk, but we don't let it go without comment. She says, "Oh, so just because you read the last page in case you're going to die, you think that makes you deep? It does not make you deep." And I like that she challenges him. She doesn't fall for that, because all of that is affectation. Everything that Harry is on the ride to New York is all affectation. None of it is genuine, and she is sort of in a slightly less genuine place as well because she's just not terribly honest with herself. But I think that she is trying, like, there's a difference between putting on an act, putting on affectation to mask your vulnerability, which is, I think, what Billy Crystal's character is doing, Harry is doing in the beginning. Whereas I think for Sally, she just doesn't know herself that well, and she's trying to figure it out. Like when he says, you're going to New York, or what's happened to you, tell me your life story. She's like, nothing's happened to me yet. That's why I'm going to New York, so that she can discover who she is. So I think that she is immediately more likable, but he is interesting, even though he's not terribly likable. And likability is not really necessarily the thing you go for with a character. It's about sympathy. It's about vulnerability. And I think that when we see him put on that kind of affectation, it comes from an essential insecurity. And there's something about that gets me, like I sympathize with that, and so I kind of like him even from the beginning. But yes, he is acting like a complete jerk.
Well, I didn't like Sally at the beginning either.
Oh,
I
okay.
hated both of them for different
Mm.
reasons. I
Hmm.
mean, for all the reasons you just said about Harry, he was an arrogant jerk
Hmm.
and just cocky, and I couldn't stand that about him. But Sally was way too controlling, very uptight, and just kind of awful. I mean, they were both awful in their own ways.
Hmm.
And his character arc, I think, was bigger than hers,
Hmm.
but I just started to appreciate her in
Yes.
the movie. I started to feel empathy for her, and so that my dislike for her decreased. But
Hmm.
in the beginning of the movie, I was thinking, wow, this is going to be a really long movie because I hate both of these people. And I also thought that the movie, I had no idea what the movie was actually about other than these two characters. And so when they get into this car and they're road tripping from Chicago to New York, I'm thinking, oh, this whole movie is going to take place during this college road trip. And 5 minutes later, the road trip was over. And I was like, I don't really know what's going to happen in this movie because that was the shortest road trip ever. And so I'm glad that we got more. We got like 2 decades of life from these
Hmm.
characters in this movie, which was fantastic.
Yeah, and her character arc is wonderful. Where in that at beginning, she's not sure about talking, and she's possibly making stuff up about her sexual history, but
Hmm.
feeling all awkward about talking about him hitting on her and getting a compliment, through to the diner scene, which is quite an arc for a character to go from that to that in not a long amount of time.
It is. I mean, it's like 12 years, but yeah.
In the screen time.
In the
But
screen time, no, it's not a lot of time, and yet, we see that process for her, and
mm,
it's not a lot of time in the movie, but I kind of feel it. Like I kind of get that. I believe it, even though it's short. I really believe it.
Well, I ended up feeling like in the first, I guess, flash forward when we went forward 5 years and we see her in the airport with Joe. My initial thought was she's the oldest 26-year-old I've ever seen. And I didn't feel that way when she was playing the 21-year-old fresh out of college, but when she played the 26-year-old saying goodbye to this man and trying to show up Harry whenever he's there, she I don't know if it was just the way she played the character or the way they dressed her. I don't know what it was, but there was something that was just a little bit off there for me.
I think it's the wig.
mm,
That
she's
wig was terrible.
It was terrible.
she lost that Farrah Fawcett hair she starts off with.
Yeah, that was grandma hair. I mean, she's a journalist. She doesn't need grandma hair. I don't know what that was about.
I think you're right, it was the hair.
Hmm.
And I think it's the shoulder pads, but that's
Yeah.
just a sign of the times, I
Mm.
guess.
The 80s aged a lot of women.
One of the things the film uses as it goes through is the talking heads of older couples about how they got together and how their relationship worked over the years. And we see lots of different ways to love or stories to how they got to where they are. What is our take on that? Is that a hopeful love comes in many ways for different people? Does that mean anything to our characters?
Well, I think it does at the end because we end with Harry and Sally doing that interview.
Mm.
So there's this kind of a conceit that there's a documentary being made, and Harry and Sally are the most interesting of the people that they're talking to about these love stories, about their lives together. And so I don't know, like until you see Harry and Sally at the end, it feels like we're just thematically talking about love. But when they come in at the end, I feel like that sort of pulls it together. Mandy, what did you think about that?
I liked it, but I'm also a sucker for romance.
Hmm.
And so I just really liked hearing all of these couples talk about how they've been together for 50 years. I was a little confused by it at first because we go from, I mean, we open with one of these interviews with
Hmm.
an older couple who's been together for years and years, and then all of a sudden we cut to college-aged Harry and Sally, and they don't even know each other. They're just meeting for the first time, and so there was a disconnect for me for how everything fit together. But knowing the formula for a romantic comedy, you know that this is a story about love or finding love, which is what all of those little interviews were about how those couples found love. But until the end, and they tied it all together, it kind of felt like two separate things.
Hmm.
But it still worked for me because I like hearing about love.
Nice. I think that was our take on it over here too. I was interested on if there were different views of it, because it's an interesting thing to have these people that we never meet all the way through. They're just putting their spin on things.
Yeah, well, and I thought it was interesting that they were actual real interviews that Nora Ephron did with people while
Mm.
she was writing the screenplay. The way I saw it worded was that when Nora didn't feel like writing one day, she would just go interview people, which I thought was hilarious. And then they put them in the movie, and I Nora's writing style is just so interesting to me because
Mm.
they had no premise for this movie when they decided they wanted to work together. And so she just started talking to people and getting stories and interviewing people's lives and their relationships. And she like melded it all together into this story. And that takes some serious talent.
Yeah, she's really incredible. Like one of the first things that Nora Ephron did was this book called Heartburn, which was about her divorce from Woodward or Bernstein. I think it was Bernstein, Carl Bernstein, who was one of the pivotal people in the Watergate reporting,
Mm.
who basically brought down Richard Nixon. Mandy, because you're young, I'm telling you that, and Matt, because you're British, I'm telling you that. And I am the old American who knows a little bit of that history, so I'll share, with you my age. But Carl Bernstein was like a big thing, and she lived in Washington with him, and then their marriage fell apart, and she wrote this novel called Heartburn, and then that ended up being made into a movie. And there's something about her very particular perspective on human relationship that I think, even though Nora Ephron hasn't done a lot of work, the work she's done has been very insightful and really incredibly sharp.
And actually thinking on the story writing side of this as a film, Lani, I've been listening to your series How Story Works, and you've talked
Hmm.
about protagonist, antagonist, the goals and the conflict in a story. Is there an antagonist in this film?
Oh yeah, there's two of them. It's actually a dual story. So,
Okay.
a lot of the stuff that I talk about in How Story Works is the beginning, like the very
Mm.
essential beginning of narrative theory. But the thing that's wonderful about narrative theory is how incredibly flexible it is. And one of the things that we need in narrative theory is you have a protagonist with a goal and an antagonist with an opposing goal. You have mutually exclusive conflict, and that makes your story. In most stories, typically you have one protagonist, one antagonist, and the story follows as that conflict escalates and then resolves. And then that's how the story goes. But there are different ways of using, narrative theory to tell a couple of different stories at once. Like George R. R. Martin, right? If anybody who's familiar with, there's this thing called Game of Thrones. Nobody's heard of it.
Oh,
I watch
really?
it. It's a
Sounds
cult
interesting.
classic. Yeah. No, it really is. It really is. But George R. R. Martin does this where he tells a ton of stories from a ton of different perspectives. So we have a number of protagonists, all of whom have their own story going on. And then they sort of weave and dance around each other, but they all are protagonists with their own story. And so that happens, and that's a perfectly legit thing. The thing is that you have to have at least one protagonist and at least one antagonist. And in When Harry Met Sally, we have two sets. So we have, well, actually, two people who are both protagonists and antagonists. We have two
Okay.
internal conflicts that are running alongside each other. And for him, and the internal conflict is basically where you have a person who is at war with themselves, that they want two things that are mutually exclusive. And for Harry, I think he wants to be happy and he wants to be connected with people, but he also is so afraid of vulnerability. He is so afraid of being hurt like that he always holds a certain part of himself back, and that makes it impossible for him to have the human connection that he wants, except with Sally. But he still can't, even when they, finally we get to the end and they've had sex and they've had this connection. Even then, he still can't quite acknowledge that this is the big thing, that this is the thing that he wants, because it is incredibly vulnerable. And I think that when we open with him, there he is all this affectation to avoid that vulnerability. So I think we see him in his internal conflict right from the beginning. And with her, I think that her internal conflict is that even from the beginning, I think she's kind of intrigued by Harry. She likes him. But she wants to basically prove that men and women can be friends. She wants to have this relationship and have it be something that shows her that the world is what she thinks it is, that it is a control thing for her. She has this incredible amount of control
Okay.
that she has to have over all of her experiences. And I think part of it is that she wants to, be able to say men and women can be friends. I have this friendship. It's just a friendship. And that's what it is. But then we see them both throughout the movie. We see these looks that they give each other. We see the way that they look at each other when the other one is with someone else. Emily is Aunt Emily. Oh my God. Like there's this whole thing. They're both jealous of the
Yeah.
other people that they're with. And it becomes something where they are both at war with themselves, because I think that she's afraid of what it will mean for their friendship if they get together, and he's afraid of that essential vulnerability. So you have these two stories that are escalating, these two internal conflicts that are escalating side by side throughout the movie, and they dance around each other. So sometimes it's her story being told, sometimes it's his. Sometimes it's both. It's really, really interesting. I like that structure a lot.
Yeah, that's a really nice take on it. I hadn't obviously hadn't thought of it in that way.
Well, usually it's one protagonist. I mean, the
Yeah.
standard way of telling a story is one protagonist, three-act structure, anchor scenes, all this kind of stuff. And that's what I'm teaching in how story works, because that's like the beginning of it. But there are so many things that you can do with story. Story is essentially malleable. As long as you understand the principles behind why most stories are told that way, you can apply those principles in other permutations. You can move it around like a puzzle rug, once you understand how it works. But you have to understand how it works first.
Well, taking all of that, let's talk about what the movie is actually trying to tell us. When I posted on Twitter that I was going to be watching this movie because we were going to do this show, it kind of immediately caused a divide between people who love this movie and people who do not love this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, the people who didn't like the movie, it was all because of what they think the movie is telling us and what the movie is about, essentially. So specifically, at Joss Ruckus and Vivian, who is at Slayer, comma the, immediately jumped into the conversation and agreed with one another that this movie was terrible because the movie is telling us that men and women can't be friends. And I can understand why someone would come out of this movie with that impression, but my impression coming out of the movie was different. And so I wanted to see what you guys thought. Is that what you believe this movie is essentially telling us? Or did you get something else out of it?
I don't believe in that core conceit that men and women can't be friends. I think that's him being an arse, but also because he's something of a ladies' man and not emotionally connected to these women that he meets up with.
Right, but that's specifically the character of Harry. What do you think that the movie as a whole is trying to tell us?
I think it goes back to the talking heads and think that there are lots of different paths to love, to an eternal relationship, some connection to someone, and it doesn't have to be the love at first sight bombshell. I've seen them, and then 2 weeks later I have to be with them. It can take many different turnings on the road.
Yeah, I think that they pinned the marketing on this idea. Can men and women really be friends? Like, this is the core theme of the story, that this is what it's about. And I think that that's the marketing. And I think that in the end, because Harry and Sally get together, it feels like the movie is saying, no, you're right. Men and women can't be friends. They're always going to want to be together. That's always the way it's going to happen. And I think that is patently untrue. And people who get annoyed by the sense that this is what the movie is saying, I completely see their point, because I think that it is wrong. And I think that the movie can absolutely be seen to be saying that. I think that what this movie is it's a love story. So the idea of whether men and women can be friends is really immaterial because that's not what we're exploring here. And that's not what this is about. This is about the building of a relationship that turns into love and how that works. And that was always where this was going to go. I know originally there was some playing around with the idea that in the end they wouldn't get together. But that's not what this movie is. That's not what this movie is about. That's not what this movie is saying. It's a love story. It's a romantic comedy. And so in the end, they have to get together because that's what the movie is about. I don't think it's about this statement that even it claims to be about. So I can see why people would be really annoyed with that. But also, I would also like to say and put forward the theory that When Harry Met Sally is not the final authority on whether or not women can be friends, men and women can be friends, or people who are attracted to each other can be friends. Because can two lesbians be just friends? Can two gay men be just friends? Yes, it happens and it's fine, you know? And we see, I don't think that giving When Harry Met Sally the power and authority to make the final statement on whether or not this one idea is true or not, I don't think we need to give them that power. I think we can just enjoy that it is a love story, it is a romantic comedy, and it hinged its marketing on this idea, can men and women just be friends? But I don't think that that's what this movie is really about.
I agree with you 100%. I think that I do think that the movie shows us that men and women can be friends because Harry and Sally were best friends for like a decade before there were
Mhm.
romantic feelings. And I feel like because so much time passes in such a short film, yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, because we go through 20 years in less than 2 hours, I think it can be really easy to gloss over some of that and to really see, well, they get together, like you said, Lonnie, so obviously men and women can't just be friends. But I feel like this movie just kind of looked at a lot of different things, and that's one of the reasons why I really, really liked it.
Mhm.
So, Lonnie, this is one of your very favorite movies.
Mhm.
So, I'm not going to let you cheat and tell me that all of it is your favorite moment, performance, and line. So, are there a few key scenes or, lines or shots in the movie that were filmed really well that are your favorites?
Oh gosh. Yeah, there's so much in this movie that I really do love, but I don't know why. I don't know why, because this is everybody's favorite thing is I'll have what she's having. Whatever. That's cute, but whatever. Um, but I think my favorite thing is when they're in I think it's the Met where they have the he's doing the pepper in my paprikash thing and they're walking through the Egyptian, display. And there's something about the way that they're talking to each other and she's and he's saying let's go to the movies and she's like no I have a date and there's this whole kind of weirdness between them and I love the subtlety of each of their performances in that moment. I think it's so like beautifully expressed and we see his hesitation but he's like no 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 you should absolutely go out and she's like well I wasn't sure I thought maybe it would be weird because there's kind of this thing and then he of course says no 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 we're just friends which sets her back a little bit because she's obviously thinking there's something more going on there maybe and not sure about it. And I love that scene. I love the way it's shot. I love that exhibit in the Met, which I think is beautiful. I go to the Met as often as I possibly can. I love all of it, and that's one of my favorite parts of it. So yeah, I don't know why that scene for me has this lovely subtlety in the dialogue and in the performance, and it's one of my favorite parts, which is weird. I don't think it's anybody else's favorite part of the movie, but for me, I really like it.
That's fantastic. The part at the beginning where he's talking at her all weird and is making her repeat at
Yeah.
him in that weird accent, that was all improvised.
Oh,
And
of course it
if you actually look really closely, when he starts,
was.
Meg Ryan laughs and looks off camera
Hmm.
at Rob Reiner because she wasn't expecting it. And apparently he told her to keep going, and so they kept doing the scene and he kept it in the movie. And
Nice.
that's how it, led into it. And people who can improv like that just have my utmost respect. I think it's amazing.
Mandy, what bits of the film did you love the most?
Oh, let's talk about the music first
Mm.
because the soundtrack of this thing was spot on. and it was done mostly by this little known musician that you may not have heard of named Harry Connick Jr.
Yeah, you didn't hear of him until then. He was like 20 years old when he did that.
I know. And when I saw him in the credits at the beginning, I was like, "Oh, I can't wait to hear this. It's going to be amazing."
Hmm.
And it was amazing. But my favorite thing was interspersed throughout the whole movie was Gershwin's "Let's Call the Whole Thing Off" song. And it's all about opposites, and it's, tomato, tomato, let's call the whole thing off. And, you do one thing and I do this other thing. And it just, that's what the movie's about. It's Harry and Sally. And I thought it was brilliant because it's subtle. They don't really call attention to it. It's just playing in the background. And I loved it.
Yeah, the songs are amazing. This is one of the movie soundtracks that I had at the time that was like always in my car. I was always listening to it. I love all of that music. And then of course we get to the core theme. It had to be you. Which is almost like we don't have a choice. It had to be you. There's no way that either one of us is getting out of this. We might as well just accept our fate. This is done. It was never not going to happen. And I kind of like that. I love the way that we're using these old standards to kind of define this progression of what is essentially like a really powerful friendship and a love that's based in friendship, that you can be in love and be friends at the same time.
I will say, I've never met anyone who says potato. The
I
tomato
don't think I
tomato
have
thing I
either.
can understand, but potato, no. No,
Yeah,
you're
because
just
you
doing
guys
that
say
because it rhymes.
tomato. Right.
Yeah, well, it's still a fun song, okay?
Yeah, you go ahead and make a rhyme with tomato, man. It's not easy.
One of my other favorite lines was actually in the beginning, when Harry and Sally were two people I couldn't stand, and Sally is trying to be all blustery about her, sexcapades and how she is experienced, and Harry's kind of calling her on it, and she's making up this reason for why it didn't work out, and she starts talking about her days of the week underpants and how her ex had gotten jealous because she didn't have a Sunday because he thought she left them somewhere.
They don't make Sunday
Why not?
because of God.
And I just burst out laughing, you guys.
It's very, and the thing is, the way that she delivers that line, like she's in her, I think, 30s at the time that she's doing this, and she's playing a 22-year-old, but she looks like a little girl. The naivete in her face, because of God. Like it's so beautifully done. It really is. I love that moment too.
And there's no explanation for it. It just is, and then we move on. Perfect.
Yeah, I totally accept
Yeah.
it. I totally buy it. It's fine. And then, you guys, I had no idea when I sat down to watch When Harry Met Sally that I was going to hear what may be the most romantic line ever uttered in the history of all romantic lines. Harry runs back to Sally and he says to her,
And it's not because I'm lonely, and it's not because it's New Year's Eve. I came here tonight because when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible.
and my heart just melted into this giant puddle. And then I found out that wasn't even in the script and Billy Crystal improvised it. And then I died even more.
It's a wonderful, genuine, expression. And I love too that it's not a polished line. It's so, and this is the thing, that he's wrapped up in this affectation throughout the whole thing. He's constantly in denial because he's trying to avoid exactly that vulnerability. Exactly that. I love you. That's it. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And the way that he delivers it is slightly awkward and slightly vulnerable. It's not this incredibly polished, speech from Mr. Darcy. It's like this genuine expression, and it's awkward and it's weird, and he's all revved up, and he's not even saying it he's saying it in this way that's like, it's just, it had to be you. I don't have a choice. This is what I got. Like I'm just acknowledging this now. And it's a wonderful culmination of his story arc, of his internal conflicts, finally resolved in this moment where he's being genuine and vulnerable in himself. And that's the moment, of course, that breaks her down, which I love.
Right. Well, that's why I liked it so much because it's not polished. It's real.
Yeah.
And you feel the emotion behind it. You understand that he's just had this moment of epiphany that he wants to be happy and so he has to change and he is doing that in this moment. And it made me happy and my little heart melted in a puddle while I was watching it. And I just did
Oh.
not expect that to happen watching When Harry Met Sally because what do you think of with When Harry Met Sally? You think of the diner scene,
Hmm.
and that's not romantic. I mean, it's silly and it's funny. And so I was really surprised at the romance that we ended up having, especially considering we started out with two pretty terrible people.
And on the almost the flip side of that, the bit not long before where he phones her and he says,
What are you doing for New Year's? Are you going to the Tyler's party? Because I don't have a date. And if you don't have a date, we always said that if neither one of us had a date, we could be together for New Year's and it could, what
I can't do this anymore. I am not your consolation prize. Goodbye.
it's anti-romantic, but I want to applaud her at that point. Like, yes, do you?
Oh,
You
I
own
love
it.
that.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
love that because she's saying these are my boundaries.
Mm.
This is where I am, and I'm not going to let you, treat me like I'm the one you get because you don't have anybody else, you know? I love when she stands her ground, when she doesn't take his calls. It's really really great. The only thing that I don't like, and this is a trope that happens in television and movies and it's been happening forever, when she slaps him. When they're at the party and they go in the back and they have that fight,
Mm.
even when she yells at him and and she says, "Oh, you took pity on me, fuck you," and the fuck you, I'm completely on board. I'm like, yes, absolutely, go sister. Then she slaps him, and I hate when women slap men. It drives me crazy. I hate it because physical assault, I don't care who is hitting who, is not okay. It's not okay. Yell at him, curse at him, absolutely fine. Tell him that he's out of line. But because it's okay for women to slap men, but it's not okay for men to slap women. And, my place is it's not okay for anybody to slap anybody. I don't care
Absolutely.
if women are physically weaker than men. It shows such an incredible lack of respect for somebody else. And part of this entire relationship, part of what made it work so wonderfully and made me believe in it so much, was that they always respected each other. So the dramatic slap from a woman to a man, I know it's a trope. I know it's a thing that we do. I hate it. It drives me crazy. And that is the one moment in this film that just does not sit right for me.
Well, it was also right before that when Harry called her a dog.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were both disrespecting each other in that moment, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And I agree with you. I'm not a fan of that because their relationship had been built on that mutual respect. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know why it devolved so much from both of them in this moment, but I wasn't a fan. Although I will say this movie had two fucks in it and they both came from Meg, and I loved that.
Yes.
But we've talked about Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan, and we've touched on the diner scene, which is one of the most famous comedy moments certainly from a rom-com. But we've not mentioned Carrie Fisher, who is wonderful in
Oh,
everything,
We've
and
not
she's
mentioned
terrific
Carrie
in this.
Fisher. I had no idea Carrie Fisher was in this movie, and when I saw her name on the screen, I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah,
oh, I love her in this movie. And when I saw her in this movie, the only thing that I knew her from was, Star Wars. She was Princess Leia. So for me, it was so strange to see her playing something so different. But I love, love, love that character. She's so good. I love he's never going to leave her. Of course, he's not going to leave her. You're right. You're right. I know you're right. Like, I've repeated that line in so many conversations with friends. She delivers it so beautifully, and I love the way. I mean, the one thing where she's got in the beginning, she's trying to set Meg Ryan up, and she's got that little Rolodex, and oh my
Rolodex, yeah.
God, remember, you guys are too young, but remember Rolodex?
Yeah, yeah.
That cracks me up.
I do remember them.
And when she does that little, oh, married, and she flips the corner down and flips it down because you're going to have to unfold that again when he gets divorced. Like, I love, love
Right,
that
right.
moment. It's so great. And she's fantastic. I adore that woman. I've always adored that woman.
And the writing and performance when they go out on the double date and they're setting each other up with each other's friends. And the chemistry she has with Bruno, the chap playing Jess, it's instant. As soon as they start talking, you can see it, and you have this really natural conversation between them. And then Billy Crystal talks to Bruno and he says, "Okay, just not tonight. Just be cool. She's in a bad place." And he goes, "Oh, of course, I wasn't thinking tonight. I wasn't thinking tonight." And he says, "I'll get a cab." She says, "I'll get it with you," and they just dart off. It's hysterical. It's the funniest thing.
It is so great. And I love when they fight over the wagon wheel coffee table.
Yes.
I promise you, I will never want that wagon wheel coffee table.
Yeah, their relationship was great. I really liked how we started the movie with Carrie Fisher being a wreck in relationships because she's with this married man who she just keeps staying with him. She keeps saying she needs to leave him. And so she's the unstable one, and Sally is the stable one. And then during the meat of this movie, that completely switches, and Carrie Fisher's character, becomes in a stable, loving relationship with Jess.
Yes.
And we've got Sally and Harry, who are both completely off the rails with all of these different relationships that they're going through. And I really liked that.
Yeah, it was a nice reversal. It was a nice swap, and it shows that there's, I think that Sally was always like living on the ragged edge anyway, like her need to control absolutely everything, because some people want it on the side. I think that shows her as somebody who is, because the thing is, like, you can try to control as much of the world and your experience as you want. You will not control it. It will not happen. And so the people who are very, very controlling, and I'm not speaking from personal experience at all, but I'm like the people who are very, very controlling and trying to like make everything just so, the world falls apart, and they just like, oh my God, like, what do I even do now if I don't have this under my complete control? And it throws them out, and it makes them get very unstable. And so I think that it was kind of a nice thing to see her, evolve from this almost false stability, almost a fake stability, a pretend stability, into like this genuine, tumble forward free fall where she just doesn't know what's going on. So I really liked seeing that in that character.
And very much in the end, the final piece with them as the talking heads, and you can see it's each other's foibles that they love more than anything else. It's not that it drives him crazy. He loves the way she orders. It's endearing to him, and it's a nice way to talk about the food and just interact and be friends.
Is there anything else that we need to talk about when Harry Met Sally? Have we covered everything that you had hoped we would cover, Lonnie?
I think so. Yeah, I think we hit on everything.
And what about you, Matthew? Did you have anything else?
Looking at other films that we might watch coming off this, there are a couple of films that are already on the list, so I'm not going to mention them. I know they are coming up. There's a film called 500 Days of Summer. Have you seen that?
Terrible movie. I hate that movie.
Oh.
Well, okay. First of all, she's seen it. Hello,
Well, yeah,
applause.
that's something at least.
Let's appreciate that.
Oh.
Can I tell you why I hate that movie?
No, you've broken my heart too much.
I hate that movie because of one word. One word.
Okay.
The last line, the last word of the movie.
Oh, really?
Yes. Oh my God. It makes me like, I totally understand why he doesn't end up with Summer, because Summer's flaky and it was a transitional relationship and all of that stuff. But in the end, they imply that he's going to have a happily ever after with this new girl that he meets. And what's her name? Why don't you tell them what her name is, Matthew?
Autumn.
I can't stand that. Like, it ruined the whole movie for me.
Because it should be fall to your American sensibilities?
No, because he had this wonderful time with Summer, and so now he has to move on to Autumn. And I didn't like it. It didn't work for me. And it made me have ragey feelings for the whole movie.
Ragey feelings. Wow, that's so interesting. So, but up until that moment, though, you liked that movie.
I didn't love it, but I liked it.
Oh, it's just that, well, okay, one of the things, too, is that we have this 500 Days of Summer, whatever, and then, to go into Autumn is so neatly tied up with a bow, and it feels too, like, exactly what we're talking about with Harry's speech at the end. That seems to be, like, the absolute opposite of that. It is so polished. It is so like, speaking to theme. It is so perfectly slotted in that it feels disingenuous, that it makes, and I think retroactively for you, and this is just my guess, I'm not a psychologist, but retroactively for you, I think what it does is it shoots the whole movie into this very, disingenuous thing. Like if I can't trust you guys not to pull that kind of crap at the end, then the rest of it is just you selling me something that's very plastic and really not real. Am I hitting that? Is that what you're
No,
getting?
absolutely. I feel like they, once I heard that, I felt like one, they thought they were being really super clever, and two, the whole rest of that movie was written specifically so they could do that at the end.
So they could do this super clever thing that doesn't pay off, that doesn't have value, and it makes everything feel like it's just bullshit,
Yes.
right?
And I personally hated it. And I know a lot of people really like that movie, but it did not work for me.
That's so
I'm
interesting how
so
that
sorry,
one moment at
Matthew.
the end can ruin the whole thing for you. No, I think this is fascinating. I've been wanting for years to do a podcast about pop culture therapy. That, like, the way that people react to certain things in stories, what that says about them and what that says about their experience. And I find this actually so fascinating.
Matthew, I'm so sorry that I don't like this movie that you
Oh,
like.
oh. A little Joseph Gordon-Levitt goes a very long way with me. I love watching him on screen, and
He's
c-
fantastic.
certainly this
Oh, I
era.
love him.
Yeah, this
I
era's
like
Louis
Zoe
Deschanel,
Deschanel.
fab. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey ho. So, I'm gonna weep in a corner. Whilst Lani, do you
Getting over
have
your
any?
heartbreak.
Lani, do you have any recommendations to see to go on the list?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about romantic comedies, obviously I can recommend romantic comedies all day. So, I mean, I don't know if you have these already on your list, but I'm going to give you a few of the ones that I love and see if you've already. Did you look at Clueless? I feel like you did look at Clueless. Did
I
you?
have seen Clueless, yes.
You have seen Clueless. All right.
Generally speaking, 90s teen movies I'm pretty solid on.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, that's one of the. I really, really like Clueless. I think it's good. French
Mm.
Kiss. You have to watch. It is the best romantic comedy that has ever been done. I love it. I watch it all the time, and it stands up every time I watch it.
It is on the list,
Mm.
and I'm
Okay.
pretty sure I've got your name jotted down next to it to invite
Oh,
back on the show
I
for
will.
it. So,
I will watch that with you. I love French Kiss, and I have a million reasons why I will defend it as the best written romantic comedy because it does a lot of the things that other romantic comedies. The reason, like, I love romantic comedies. It's my genre. Like, I will love it even when it's bad. It's basically like a dog to me. Like your dog, you love even when they poop in your shoes, right? So I have this thing about romantic comedies that the romantic comedies is my dog genre. Like, and Matthew, for you, it might be sci-fi is your dog genre. Like, even when it poops in your shoes, you're gonna like it, right? So for me, romantic comedy absolutely does that. But I understand the reason why a lot of people don't like the poopy shoes. Like, I understand that there are things that I'm taking that metaphor really far, but there are things that in romantic comedies that they do really poorly. There's the I'm hot, you're hot, let's be hot together.
Mm.
There's a movie called Hitch, which actually
Ugh.
is fascinating because it's one of these movies that is terrible for half of it and wonderful for half of it. Sort of like Julie and Julia. Like, the
right.
one story is great and the other story is just horrible. And we kind of have that situation in Hitch, which I think is fascinating. There's so much to unpack there because of the bad stuff. The bad stuff gives you really interesting discussions to have. So Hitch is something that I would actually recommend, even though half of it is terrible, because half of it is terrible. Another one is, I don't know if you've seen While You Were Sleeping.
I have seen it. It's been a really, really long time. I went through a Sandra Bullock phase.
Yeah. It's good. It's good. And 2 Weeks Notice, actually, we mentioned that before as an example of a bad romantic comedy. But actually, 2 Weeks Notice, if you take out, there's like 3 scenes in 2 Weeks Notice that are absolutely indefensible. If you edit them out in your head, the movie is wonderful, aside from those 3 scenes. So that's a really good one, too. And that can have interesting conversations. But I got to tell you, Mandy, like when it comes to romantic comedies, you and I got to sit down. We got to talk.
All right. All
We
right.
got to watch some of these because there's some really, really great stuff out there.
Okay. I will definitely keep you in mind for when we
Okay.
come up against some romantic comedies. Though I will say I am more well versed in the romantic comedy genre than I am in most others.
Okay.
This one slipped through primarily because it's from the 80s,
Right.
and I just have had no experience with the 80s.
Well, there's a movie called The Sure Thing that I love that's from the mid 80s. It's John Cusack. One of my favorite movies. Terrible. Like there's so many things in it that are so bad, but I love it. It poops in your shoes, but I love it. I love it.
I don't even think I've heard of that one, but I am a big fan of John Cusack, and so I'm
Oh,
trying to remedy.
it's fantastic. I mean, it's
Okay.
terrible, but it's fantastic.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for those suggestions, and we will definitely keep you in mind for future romantic comedies.
Oh, do please.
I love our listeners, and I love getting feedback from our listeners, and I love highlighting that feedback. So this week we had some responses from three of our shows. Because some folks are actually catching up. We have a lot of folks who listen to the show who are like me and haven't seen things, which blows me away because I thought I was alone in my deprivation, but I'm not. And folks don't like to listen to us talk about these movies they haven't seen because of spoilers. So these are from, some older episodes. Stephanie Marie, who is at I'm Stephtacular on Twitter, really enjoyed our discussion about The Dark Knight and is very interested in my thoughts on other DC moving forward. And I don't know that we have other DC on the list right now, other than The Dark Knight Rises. Is there other stuff that we were going to put on the list, Matthew?
Potentially Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman if we have to. That
So
was
that's a no.
that was Suicide Squad at the end, which just gets worse every time I see it. Um, which I think you tried,
I
Suicide Squad.
I did try it. It was when we were on the cruise a few weeks back, they give you this one movie channel that just plays movies over and over and over again. And Suicide Squad was one of those movies, and we didn't finish it. We turned the TV off.
Oh.
It just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So, Stephanie, you may or may not get more conversation about DC once we actually finish the Christopher Nolan trilogy. So.
If they start making films worth watching again, then maybe. Um, I
Well,
think.
we have been talking about doing a mini episode about Wonder Woman
Mm,
that we may release on Patreon. So, we're still talking about that. We may do it, we may not, I don't know.
I think we should probably do Batman versus Superman because there was a good film in there desperately trying to get out.
Okay. Alan Ostrom at Chipper Allen sent us a response to our episode on Schindler's List, and he said, "Amazing job, you guys. Your best episode yet. You handled it just right, and it was really affecting." And I really appreciate that because that was a tough conversation,
Mm.
and it was a tough movie, and it was hard to talk about it, and we wanted to do it in a way that was respectful and appropriate for the material. And so I'm really glad to know that we succeeded.
Yeah, it was a tough conversation because the internet dropped out once or twice, so we had to restart it in places, which
Yeah,
really didn't help it flow. But it came out really nicely, so that's good.
it did. It
A
did.
little behind the scenes for you there.
And lastly, Jan M at JLMO was just like me in The Graduate, and she said she raged pretty hard to find out Anne Bancroft is a year younger than her. And I'm right there with her. That I was not okay with finding out that Anne Bancroft was only 35 when she played Mrs. Robinson. So yeah, we're right there in solidarity. So if you want to get in touch and give us your comments on this or any other movie we've discussed, you can use the hashtag PCDeprived on Twitter. You can also email us using podcast at eloquentgushing.com, or you can comment on this post on eloquentgushing.com. You can find each of us on Twitter. I'm at Mandy K.
And I'm at Matthew Vose. Lani, where can people find you in the world?
Oh, people can find me. I'm at Lani Diane Rich on Twitter. You can also find me at chipperish.com, which is the website from which I do all my podcasts. So
Go check it out. There's some wonderful stuff for everyone to find there. Something for everyone, I'm sure.
aw,
Um,
thanks.
please also remember to rate and review us on iTunes to help people discover the show and let us know when you review. As we said up top, we're now on Patreon, so you can find us patreon.com/eloquentgushing, and from just $1 a month, you can gain access to exclusive content and further rewards.
We'll be back next week with another episode of Pop Culturally Deprived, where Matthew and I will talk about the final season of Farscape. Until next time, I'm Mandi Kay.
And I have a number of men friends, and there is no sex involved.
Pop Culturally Deprived is an Eloquent Gushing production. For more information, visit eloquentgushing.com or find us on Twitter @eloquentgushing.